is organised around 4 themes. And this first theme, it doesn't really matter which way the public feel and not you can't persuade people to go down in any direction. And it is quite an open-ended show in terms of the fact that strands that start off here get picked up in other galleries. But this looks at early global trade in cotton, and it's really about India. Because one of the things, particularly in this region, that I've noticed when you're talking to young people, and a lot of old people as well, is that because cotton was so important to Manchester and Lancashire, is this feeling that it all started here. And without Lancashire, without the technological innovations, there'd have been no cotton industry. Well, that's just not true, because India was trading globally in cotton, as I say, from the Middle Ages onwards. And they were trading, if you imagine, I hope one day there might be a map with the interpretation, but I haven't got round to that yet. India was trading in all directions, really, from its place on the globe. It was trading eastwards to places like Indonesia, China and Japan, mainly Japan and Indonesia. And lots of things have been found. These two hangings here, just to give you one example. These were found in Indonesia. And they're 17th century, but they came from northwest India. So that's how we know that their products were getting that, to places like Java and Sumatra and Sulawesi. But they were also trading in the other direction, westwards, and getting as far as the Middle East and Saudi Arabia and Egypt. So all of these tiny little fragments, quite beautiful little fragments, were all block printed again in northwest India from about 1400 to 1700. And they've all been excavated in Egypt. So there's quite a big body in collections around the world to prove of this material, to show that there was a lot of trade going on between Egypt and India at that period. And eventually, by about the sort of early 18th century, quite late 70s, early 80s, a lot of products were finding their way to Europe from India, and that's what these other two pieces tell the story of. And you have to imagine a world where you couldn't have cotton. And again, it's quite difficult, I think, from a sort of education point of view, looking at Stephen. If you imagine a world where you only had wool and linen, and you didn't have silk, because silk was only for the very rich, but you had no cotton, because cotton wasn't grown in Europe, the climate's wrong, it was tropical. It was not being imported into Europe. So when these things came in from India, people just blew their minds away, because the colours were fantastic, as you can see, they survived really well. When you washed them, well, in fact, you could wash them, because wool is quite, you can't wash it as often as you can wash cotton. So wool didn't get washed often enough. It didn't crease like linen creases, and it didn't fade when you washed it. And people wanted it so much that the government in the late 17th and early 18th century kept trying to ban imports of cotton, because it was undermining the other industries. Anyway, they failed. And by the end of the 18th century, we had our own growing industry, because why would you bring it all the way from India if you could think of a way of producing it locally? It's a long way from India, but that's another story. And the only difference between these two cases, and I hope it's visually quite marked, is another point the show tries to make is that the Indians, just like contemporary global commerce, customised products for different parts of the industry. So they didn't send the same things to Indonesia that they sent to Western Europe, but also even within Western Europe, British taste really like these kind of rather pale browns, cream light browns, and sort of trailing designs. Whereas the Dutch, this is all Dutch material, they like really strong colours, greens, really strong greens and reds, and not the kind of pale browns that we get. So all the marks, as I say, of global commerce from a very early period. If you just move over there now, this is it doesn't mention the word, it mentions the word Lancashire in the text, but the Lancashire story, that's what it's about. It's about technology, because as I say, not having any cotton of our own, it was imported from India and from the United States. There was that Atlantic cotton and printed in Lancashire before it got sent out. So the route came raw cotton into Liverpool, dispersed around the Lancashire mills, and then there were some mills in Manchester as well, but Manchester was really the trading hub, and that was another reason for doing the exhibition, because it's this sense that it's a global story and you're looking outwards. I mean, Manchester's made its money, essentially, from looking out to the world, I would argue. It was all about the export trade, and that's what the exchange building is about. It's where everybody gathered to kind of hammer out the prices of cotton. So, you know, all the architecture in Manchester reflects this industry as well. All the buildings on Portland Street and Whitworth Street were all warehouses for storing cotton before it got sent out around the world. So in three cases, and it's really hard to do, it kind of tries to tell the story of those revolutions in technology, which was about spinning and weaving technology. And this does it in just two dresses. I hope it does it in two dresses. So you have one dress from the 1780s where the cotton was imported from India, but the printing on it was done in the UK. But still, elite dress. This could only have been bought and worn by somebody fairly elite. This is only 40 years on, 1830s, late 1830s, and it's just an ordinary day dress worn by an ordinary middle-class woman in Preston. By the late 1830s, everybody could have cotton, and that's the beginning, really, of the kind of modern story of us thinking, okay, yeah, cotton is absolutely abundant, we can all wear it and have it, and the price keeps getting beaten down. This case is deliberately placed in the middle, opposite India, because it tells what happened to that Indian trade. When, with spinning and weaving, speeding up hugely what you could produce in a day, the Lancashire industry was able to cut the Indian industry quite significantly, put a lot of Indian craftsmen out of work in the 19th century, because theirs remained essentially a hand industry, using hand looms and things like that. This was all kind of fully automated. And most of the textiles in this case were produced in Lancashire for export back to India. Using Indian patterns, as you can see, and the one on the right there is called a sari, and it's a sari length for the Indian market. The shalwar, the pants, these all date from the 20th century, but they were all made for the Indian market. And interestingly, they were founded in India, made from a Manchester cotton. So again, it's kind of the other side of this story again. And the last case tells in a rather beautiful way about the rise and fall of the Lancashire industry, because it really only lasted a good 100 years. The peak was in 1912, which again is quite interesting in terms of where we are now in 2012. The peak of the industry was 1912, just before the First World War, when Lancashire output dominated the world, and most of it was made for export. We could produce what we needed very early in the day, as it were, and then everything else that was produced in the day was sent around the world, everywhere around the world. Manchester goods. But a number of things undermine that industry. The war itself, because if you're importing cotton from all over the world, your trade routes get destroyed when you can't get anywhere because of the war. Lack of investment, in fact, it's ironic, given the title of Revolutions in Technology, that the Lancashire industry failed to invest later on in the day in new machinery to keep that industry going. And labour was cheaper in other parts of the world. Again, it's a problem if you always have to import your raw material. And so it made it ultimately, it's why now the industry sits very firmly in China, because they can grow their own cotton as well as going to weave their own cotton. They don't have to move it around the world. But what happened? By the 1950s, the rules were closing every week all over the country. And from the 1940s onwards, the government made repeated efforts to try and raise the profile of cotton, and that's what this is about. part of that effort was to say to people, do you know what? Cotton isn't every day, it isn't an ordinary thing. You can even use it in couture collections. And these were part of the couture, these couture collections ran from about the early 1940s through the war when they were exported to right to the end of about 1958-59 when they gave up really. And this wedding dress, the evening dress, is from 51 and that's from 42 when there was a shortage of material, so that's in an export cotton. But really, they accepted failure by 58-59 when the mills just kept the very last mills, producing mills, closed in the early 1980s. Stories being about America and the UK, or the UK, America and South Asia. But actually, it is a global story. So although in places like Japan, a lot of hemp was used rather than cotton, China, for example, it's been the main fibre in Chinese clothing again since the Middle Ages here, and since the Ming period in China. And it's been an incredibly important fibre in West Africa, because again, a lot of those West African countries can grow cotton, the climate's right for cotton, they've been able to spin and weave their own cotton, and examples of cotton clothing have been found in caves, cave burials in Mali that date back to 1000 AD. So we've got plenty of evidence of there being a cotton, not a cotton industry, but cotton production in West Africa from very early times. Now, again, because it is a global story, we've really only, what we've done here, but these taken off the top, the one on the far right, which I'll take first, just looks at, and the things on the wall, look at the kind of products that have come out of the industry production in West Africa. And it focuses on two main areas of use of cotton. The case is full of what we call strip weaves, and that's where you weave cotton. When it's spun, you weave it into quite narrow strips, anywhere between about 4 and 9 inches, and that's because of the kind of handlooms that they have. And then you join all the strips together, and you make a big blanket, or you make a wrap for somebody's body, but they're called strip weaves. And therefore they're predominantly striped, because it suits the strip weave, they look striped. But the other thing people do in cotton, for example, is dye it. And it's very, very well known for what we think of as tie-dye and things like that, but it's really called resist dye. So the quilt on the wall is a contemporary artist's example of using those traditional techniques. Whereas the one straight down here, that orange strip on the bottom wall there, is much earlier, that's around 1910, 1920. And it's an example of using, not tie-dye, where you get cassava flour, make it into a paste. You can do this with wax, again, or a resin, but they do it with cassava flour. And if you put that on, and then dye your cloth, the paste resists the dye. So you can make patterns using stencils. That's actually a stencil one, that's why you get all these kind of figures and shapes. So, various forms of resist dyeing with indigo. And again, indigo is a crop that grows really well because it likes a tropical climate. It grows really well in West Africa. So the combination of, and you'll see, we'll hope we get back to the back gallery eventually before 10 o'clock, that one of the artists we've been working with is revisiting these techniques. And then I am going to have to move a bit more quickly. These two cases have been deliberately set up to tell that global story. Can I ask you to do that? I can see it, but I just carry on talking through it. Let me just give you one little example of how this works, this sort of moving around the world and the global bit. In Indonesia, they've been producing batiks for centuries. And again, it's another resist technique. You cover your cloth with wax, where you don't want the dye to penetrate, and you make patterns then by dyeing it, and then you put the wax on in different places. So these are typical Javanese batiks, nice ones from our collection. British had, and traded around the world, well, as much as the French and the British did. And one of their outposts was Indonesia, and so the Dutch were constantly bringing back textiles like this from Indonesia, and they tried to speed up the process. Again, just like we did in Lancashire, how can we industrialise this? How can we mechanise this so that we can sell it back to Indonesia at kind of, a fraction of the price? Anyway, they did this, and they perfected a technique called wax, just called wax batik, that you could do on a machine. But they didn't like it in Indonesia at all. They could tell the difference, they didn't like it. So it never caught on in Indonesia. But the Dutch also traded with West Africa, and some of their imitation batiks, as they were, the West African market adored, because they liked all the imperfections that the Indonesians didn't like. They found them quirky and interesting, and in fact those imperfections then became a key part of the design. So this case here, you might be very similar on this one. So actually, these are all industrial wax. So these two here, which look incredibly Indonesian, were actually made for the West African market in the between 1940 and 1970. These two. And another thing that happens with the West African market, apart from, let's say, liking the kind of the cracking that you get in the wax and everything, and the mistakes, is the use of quite quirky design motifs. And I'm looking at Naomi here because she really likes wax batik. And they are full, aren't they, of quite quirky motifs. And nowadays you get things like mobile phones on them. But this one, as you can see, has got spark plugs on it. This is one from the 1940s with a set of spark plugs. But you can get any sort of motifs on them. And they became a distinctive textile in their own right, to the point where if you show anybody now something like this, they say, oh yeah, that's an African fabric. And that's, on that point, I'm going to leave those for a minute and stay around for a minute. We might get style art at University at the Fine Art Institute of Chicago. And I came across her work about a year ago, because she'd been working in the southern part of the United States, USA, on a project that was to do with the decline of the cotton industry, the textile industry in the South, in Tennessee. And she worked with one gallery in Tennessee, on and off over a year, on a series of projects related to, as I say, the sort of decline and fall of the industry in America. And it's a similar story. I mean, even though you can actually grow cotton in the States and produce it, the labour's cheaper in other parts of the world to actually have things made up. So what you're getting there, and it's happened much later there, is that same disconnect that we've experienced here in the UK for a long time now. A disconnect between the product and the wearer, or the producer and the maker, that kind of thing. Because now increasingly American cotton is sent to China to be spun and woven into cloth, and that possible then be sent to another part of the world, perhaps be made into jeans or t-shirts or whatever. So those were the issues that, and as soon as I read about this project, I thought that's absolutely what we're doing here at Whitworth. How interesting to bring the American story into it. So let me just quickly run you through the various bits. This striped cloth here, which is called local industry cloth, I can't remember how long it took to work, but it was produced by 70 odd different weavers. They all knew how to weave. They were either hobby weavers, but they knew how to weave, or they were professional weavers. And the cloth, it's almost twice the length that we're showing. And if we've got the staff and the energy, we'll turn it halfway through the exhibition, because the colours are quite different at the other end. They're much hotter when they look at this end. And all the fibre was donated by the mills that had closed in Tennessee. That's why it's called local industry cloth. I have to say they're not all cotton, but we didn't worry about that too much. You'll see there's lots of synthetics in there as well. We just thought the ideas were more interesting here than the fibre itself. It's not switched on at the moment, but there's some of you will have seen a triple screen video on that wall there. just showing stripes, and all that is, it's her logbook. She calls it a logbook, and that's what the label says. She's got her own collection of stripe fabrics. She photographed in museums, because the stripe is kind of, as we said, is the fundamental design, motif really, because it's the easiest thing you can do when you're setting a loom. And that's why we have this large display behind us of striped cloth from Egypt. Because one or two of the artists, not all of them, and I certainly didn't make it a condition, because I didn't want the exhibition to feel like artist interventions into collections, but several of the artists said to me, can we look at your collection? And we explored what it was they might be interested in. In the Alice case, she said, can I look at stripe textiles all around the world? Which is what she did at 2 days in September last year. But then she said, I didn't know you had such a fantastic collection of really, really old textiles. You can see the date is 600 to 900. So she chose this selection of striped textiles that were excavated in Egypt to put in the show as well. Now the videos are very rapid because these are important to what's going to happen as the show carries on. The 2 videos are called Walking the Walk. And in case you're asked, walking the walk, if you work in kind of if you live in a pre-industrial society, and there are still people doing this in West Africa and parts of Central America, you put pegs along the ground to mark where you're going to walk the walk. When you're set, the wall is, if you've ever done any weaving, is the vertical foundation of threads. Before you can go in and out to weave the cloth, you've got to have the vertical threads, so you've got to set those up. And it used to be done with these pegs in the ground, and literally people would walk in and out of the pegs to set the walk up. And that is what's happening in these 2 videos. It's called Walking the Walk. Now, the first one she did, the green one, was done in 2008 in Chicago in her own gallery, over a 4-day period, with this kind of luminous fibre that you use for safety purposes on the streets. And they had a real walk at the end of it, but nobody used it for weaving, but they could have used it for weaving. This one was done in Houston as part of an exhibition in 2010 about the performative impact in art and craft. And she's going to make a Manchester one. There's going to be Walking the Walk Manchester. But the difference is, and this one, it's going to happen just on one afternoon at the end of February, Saturday 20th of February. If anybody looks interested, tell them. We've got lots of visitors. It's going to happen in the south. We're not going to put pegs in the floor. We're going to put yellow spots in all the places where you would have had the pegs. And a group of young dancers from the Lowry, they're aged about 12 to 16, are rehearsing solidly now for 2 weeks on a movement performance, and they'll be doing this is a 4-movement performance. They'll just be repeating it all afternoon. But because they're so young, they're going to take breaks, and we've decided now they're going to do 40 minutes on, 20 minutes off, and that's going to be part of the choreography, because they just can't do it. These people did it all day, and made the exercising part of the break part of the choreography. But there is a big difference. Walking the Walk Manchester will have no walk. They'll just be doing the motion. And the reason for that is because there's no more textile industry. It's not just disappearing, it's gone. And when Anne realised, she came to see some defunct mills with me. When she realised we didn't have a single functioning mill left, she decided to make Walking the Walk Manchester about absence. And that will be filmed and will then be showing in the gallery 6 or 7, I forget the numbers, but the one over there, in one of those viewing rooms. And there's a sign up, there'll be a sign up now just saying coming soon, because it'll probably take till about beginning of March to get the film, the edited film, up and running there. But it will be part of this display then. Let's go there.